Happy Sunday. Um, I am excited this morning. I know it's not really Sunday morning when I'm saying this, but I'm excited regardless um, to be able to preach and teach from the book of Ecclesiastes today. I went through a number of years teaching and preaching in the church here from the book of Proverbs. And when we reached the end of that, I thought, well, it makes sense. Let's continue on into one of the other wisdom books. And so we were going to look into Ecclesiastes. And then as I continued to study it more and more, I kept pushing it back a little bit and a little bit and a little bit until I could really have a good solid grasp on it. And then when I had that solid grasp on it, I was met with the question of how best to teach this. Proverbs was much easier, I think, because you can take, a little proverb and really they're more standalone. Ecclesiastes is a whole thing. And so I thought and toyed with the idea of teaching all of Ecclesiastes in one sermon. And then I read it a couple more times over. I've probably, I don't know, I've read it many times in the last 6 months, over and over. And then I'm like, I don't know, there's this problem, this problem, this problem. Not with teaching it, but like in the book of Ecclesiastes, the preacher is addressing a number of problems. And so I think what we're going to do is, for my preaching schedule, which is usually about once a month, we are going to spend the next year probably looking into Ecclesiastes, or at least the remainder of this year. And so we'll look at all the different sections of problems that the preacher and the author bring up. And then at the end, we will most likely have that teaching of the entire book at once. And so we're going to break it up, and then we'll put it all together because there's something to do there. But for your personal study, what I would recommend for you to do is to take some time, block off some time, enough time that you can sit down and read all of Ecclesiastes. There's only 12 chapters. It's not a crazy long book. I like these standalone books of the Bible quite a bit, especially for just focusing in on one book. And so this is it's not a thick book. And so sit down and, without any distractions around, read through the entire book once, and then continue to sit there and read through it again. And I think there's a great value in that, to slowly kind of mull through it and read it all in one sitting, so you have it fresh on your mind and going through it, and then read it again. And it just, you'll see things maybe that you didn't see the first time around. And before you open the book, to pray and say, Lord, would you help me to understand this? Would you help me to glean some wisdom from it and apply it to my life? Because it's a very interesting book. The teaching method itself is very interesting. So Ecclesiastes, it opens up and almost like an introduction. If you've ever been at a conference or maybe a church rally or something like that, where there's a guest speaker, or some sort of teaching where there's a keynote speaker kind of thing, what will often happen is someone comes up to the stage and they introduce the speaker. And maybe they make a list of his accomplishments or qualifications or credentials or something like that. And then that person comes up and they take the space. They take the stage, and they're the one who is doing the main teaching for the day. That's what we have in Ecclesiastes here. It's interesting, right? You might miss it at first look, but we have two different people come up. We have the author and we have the preacher, right? And so chapter 1, verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. And that's all we get for the introduction, but it's this introduction, and then later on in chapter 12, the author comes back in, and whether it's the same person kind of with two sides of their mind, or if it is a separate writer who's summarizing the words of the preacher, most likely Solomon, then there's that. But we have these two difference. And so it's a very effective and interesting teaching method, almost where, like in a philosophy kind of way, where you pose a question and then you explore the question and you say, well, here's one answer and here's where it falls short, and here's another answer and this is where it falls short. And then finally we have an actual answer given. And so it's very interesting to me. Very good teaching method, I do believe. And so, but from that, it can become challenging to read and to study. It is a book that I would not say that you should sit down and read a small portion of it. Now, you need to have a big bite out of it to really get that grasp and get the understanding. Much like if you opened up to the book of Job, right? So we have three main wisdom books in the Bible. We have Proverbs, which we looked at, Ecclesiastes, which we're looking at now, and then the book of Job, which, yes, is a history, but it's also a wisdom book. But if you just open up the book of Job and you happen to be reading one of his friends' comments about God, and that's it. You don't take context. You don't take the time to look at the bigger picture. You don't come to look at when God speaks back to his friends and say, "You have spoken about me what is wrong." Then you won't get a good grasp and you won't get what the author is actually trying to communicate. And so I would say this is not a book to just look at one verse isolated, but rather to look at it in the big picture of the book. And so we have that. So let's read. In verse 2, we are introduced to the problem that needs to be addressed. And while it's not posed like a question, it certainly is one. In verse 2, we read, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity." We are somewhat limited today with our English language. We have a lot more words than they did in Hebrew, but it seems sometimes the depth of that is missing. And so this idea of vanity, the Hebrew word here, and I might mispronounce it if you're a Hebrew scholar, I'm sorry, is habel. I've also heard it hevel, but I don't see the V there, so and I don't see that when I look up how to pronounce it, but hebel. And yes, it is translated into vanity, but it also has this idea of a vapor, a breath, something that is fading, that can't be grasped, almost like smoke. And a vapor in a way that points us to a desire for something more. One of the biblical dictionaries that I use, it painted the picture of an idea of like a scent almost that comes in through the nose and out through the mouth. But that's the only interaction you get with it. It's just going on. And so this painted quite a relatable picture for me, and I hope it will for you as well. One of the things that I enjoy to do as a hobby is to barbecue. And I have two charcoal grills. One's like a portable camping one, and then one's a permanent setup. And I think everyone should start their barbecuing with charcoal. It teaches you the foundations, and it's a great way to go. And you can do it when the power's out, and it's just, you learn that, you'll get the rest. We don't need to go too deep into that today. But then I also picked up, 2 years ago, I think it was, I picked up a large, and I mean large, pellet grill, and I can cook a lot of food on that all at once. And one of the things that I enjoy barbecuing for people is brisket. Now, brisket is probably my favorite thing to do for a large group of people, and I'll do an ultra low and slow method. Like I'll have my grill at 180 to 200, and I'll smoke the brisket for close to 24 hours, and you'll hit the wall. And so I don't need to go into that too much, but regardless, it's quite the process. And there's a point after the wall, which is when the temperature rising of the meat stalls. So it's going up, going up, going up, going up, and then it hits like 150, 145 kind of thing, and then for it to get from there to like the 160 mark, it can take hours and hours and hours, and your first time you're getting nervous about it. But anyways, and then once it gets past that stall, what you do, or what you can do, what I like to do is what's called the Texas cheat, where you take the brisket and you wrap it in aluminum foil or in butcher's paper. I have become preferring to do butcher's paper for that, for various reasons. I think it gives it a better crust at the end. And then you continue to smoke it till it hits like 203 to 206. And then you pull the brisket and you got to let it rest, like you should with any meat that you cook, really. You let it rest. Otherwise, you'll cut it and all the juice will go out, kind of thing. And so you rest a brisket for, at minimum, about an hour. And I like to rest it in a cooler. So what I'll do is I'll take one of my coolers, and near the end of the smoke of the brisket, I'll fill the cooler up. Well, not all the way, but I'll put boiling water into the cooler so that it's nice and hot and kind of steamy and humid. And then that's what the brisket goes into while it's still wrapped. And so then the cooler's sitting there in my house, and I'll invite, quite a few people over. And some of you probably have been there for these barbecues. And the whole house, it has this scent of the smoke, whatever wood you were using. That's there, and the meat and the spices from the rub that you put on it. And it's nice. It's a great smell. I enjoy it. But then it's time to get the meat out of the cooler, unwrap it, and cut it up. And I'll call some of the guys over for that. And opening up the cooler, and it's like this wall of steam coming out, and it hits you, and it smells so good. And then you have to unwrap it, and you're trying to lift it out of the paper without getting juice everywhere, and then you separate the two muscle groups, cut it up, and bon appetit. It's time to eat kind of thing. I was gonna say bon appetit, but I'm not good with the other languages there. But then it's time to eat. And so I want to paint this picture for you. Let's say I invite you and your family over for a barbecue, and I make this brisket, and it's there in the cooler, and I have the cornbread muffins that I like to do with it. Maybe Tori's put a salad together kind of thing. You're drinking a coffee, you're waiting for the main event, which is this large piece of meat. And then I bring you into the kitchen, and I open up the cooler, and all the steam comes up, and you smell it, and it's like, oh, this is so good. And I'm like, all right, thanks for coming. Have a good rest of your day. What? Oh, you got to smell it, right? You got to get the vapor from it. You got the sense of it. Isn't that enough? No, you didn't come for that. You're still hungry. You want the meat. You want the brisket. That's the idea here. Is this idea of vanity, of havel, of this vapor that it comes in and it's gone, and it's leaving you with this feeling of, I thought there was more to this. I thought there was more to this. I want more. I'm craving more. I'm not filled. My hunger is not met. And that's exactly what the preacher is talking about here. And so the preacher cries out over and over, as we're going to see in the next two chapters, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, meaningless, purposeless, vapor. I can't hold on to it. It's not what I thought it was. A frustration with life in general. And as we will see, the preacher, he looks at everything, and if he looks long enough at it, he comes to this conclusion: this is utterly pointless. This is meaningless. I am in despair, and I don't know where to look. Vanity of vanities. Hold on. Don't leave. I know it's a depressing note, but there's hope. There's something at the end that we're going to get to. It is a wonderful lesson here. So the preacher goes on, and he looks at man's work, and he looks at time, and he looks at the lack of development or success that can actually happen. And so let me read to you chapter 1, verses 3 to 11. It reads, "What does man gain by all the toil meaning work, at what he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and it goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuit the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things yet to be among those who come after." And so the preacher, he's making this statement. He's considered the work of man. He's considered the nature of time. And he's come to the conclusion, this is pointless. We are going after and after and after all these different things, and it's overwhelming and it's constant and it's never ending, but it doesn't get us anywhere. If you look at the descriptions that he makes there, we do all this work, but then we're going to die. A generation comes and a generation goes. You can look back through human history and it's just generation after generation, and they're working and they're working and they're working, but for what? They're going to die. Oh, well, I'm doing it for my kids. They're going to die. I'm doing it for my grandkids. Someday they are going to be ancient history. A generation comes and a generation goes. It says the sun rises and then it comes down, and then it rises and it goes down, and it rises and it goes down. Over and over, the same thing, over and over. It talks about the wind blowing around. If you think about, you can look at the wind patterns of the earth, and it's just over here and then back around this way and over and over and over. The water one, I really like this. He mentions this idea of all streams run to the sea, but the ocean, or rather I think he says the sea is not full. We're in Nova Scotia. We have all of these lakes and these rivers, and you can drive up to Cape Breton and you can see the Margaree with all of its might constantly going out into the ocean. But the ocean's not full. It feeds the clouds, and the clouds feed the lakes, and the lakes feed the rivers, and the rivers feed the sea, and it's just going and going and going. The water that you drink this morning has been here for a millennium. That very water has gone through the Hudson, and it's gone through Niagara, and it's gone through deer and dinosaurs, and it's tracked through all these different systems, but it always just seems to come back to the sea. And then it goes somewhere, and then it comes back to the sea. But for what? It's never full. It never reaches its end. All things are full of weariness. It's just constant, on and on and on. Even the idea of our functions, our senses. My eyes see, and I can go out to the ocean, and they see, and they see, and they see. Further and further, the longer I look, and it's never enough. And it's weird to complain about this in a way, but it's showing just it never ends. It never ceases. It's never enough. One of the things that I enjoy that we do here at the church is we have this camping trip the first weekend of September, the long weekend there, that we'll go out and we go camping. One of the things we do there is we'll have a fire and we'll sit back and we'll look up at the stars, and we'll try and see all the satellites and shooting stars and that kind of thing. But the longer you look at that night sky, the more stars you see. And it's like the eyes are never tired of seeing. On and on and on they look. Or your ears, you hear something and you're in an area where it's fuller sound, and you're in maybe a large auditorium or a big sporting event or a rally or something, and it's just over and over. And it's just this idea of overwhelming, constantly working. There is no rest. There is no break. And the preacher, he makes this claim, it is accomplishing nothing. And the time outlasts us all. That, there is no remembrance of former things. People like to live with this idea of, well, I am leaving a legacy. You will be remembered for 3 generations and then not at all. And I know this is a depressing note. We're going to get to some joy near the end. But it's this idea, like, you can look through history, and even these people who are so famous for so wonderful things, 1,000 years from now, are they going to be remembered? The people who today are making society better, for what? The very society that we have built up may crumble and fall and disappear into history like the many, many societies before it. We look through and they tear apart the Amazon, and they're finding more and more ruins of these ancient civilizations. And it's like, who were these people? There's a whole, there's this massive period of time in Egypt's history of, we have no idea what happened. And there's people during that time who thought that they were building things up and working these wonders and doing great things for society. Not looking forward and seeing that this society itself will come to be nothing. And so the preacher poses this problem, this question. And when we could make it down to one statement, it kind of would be, what is the point of life, of work, of everything? What is the point? And so the preacher explains that he has tried to answer this question. He has want to answer this question, which is an age-old question. There's many people out there who are asking the question, what is the purpose of life? And so he tries to explain. And as we will see, he tries to search for it in some main areas that many people today and throughout history have tried to find the answer of what is the purpose of life. They have looked for knowledge, they have looked at pleasure, and they have looked at work. And these are pretty normal places to try and find purpose and fulfillment. Many people today are living in these areas thinking that it will bring a fullness to their life. The preacher has already pursued them, and we will see what he says. The preacher, in pursuit of wisdom and knowledge, in verses 12 to 17a, I'm breaking 17 up a bit, it says, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. And it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And in my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. And so he's grown in wisdom and knowledge and understanding. And if this is Solomon, and most people believe that it is, then he even has wisdom that God has divinely given to him. God posed the question to him, what do you want? And his answer was, Lord, I want wisdom. I want to be wise. And so, God grants that wish and said that he's the wisest that there ever was. And so he thinks, well, maybe if I grow in wisdom, if I grow in my knowledge, then from that I will have an understanding that through that I will find purpose. And he has studied what people are doing. He has listened to counsel. He has read books and pondered many things. He has grown in his understanding and learned a multitude of views on everything. And he wants to learn as much as he can, to learn wisdom, madness, and foolish. He has taken the time to not just answer the question of what does the wise think of this, but what does the fool think of this? And what does those who are mad, what do they think of this? He's not just considered the right or the wise point of view, but he's taken the time, and this is a tasking thing to do, to consider all the different point of views, even those that he would deem to be foolish or mad. He's taken the time to learn their way and to think. And what has this resulted in? Well, in the rest of 17 and 18, we find our answer. So in 17, and I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly, and I perceive that this is also but a striving after the wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So he thought, if I'm going to look to grow in wisdom and knowledge, and in that maybe I will find the purpose of living, I will find fulfillment, and that will be answered. But no, he found problems, much vexation. The curse of knowledge, the more you know, the more problems you are aware of. And it just becomes more and more and more and more. It's like someone who's living in a house, and maybe they're aware that this house shifts in the winter, causing the door to stick a little bit. But then someone comes over and they come for a visit and they point out, well, the paintwork is quite sloppy. Your toilet downstairs is running. The deck isn't up to code. Your septic hasn't been pumped in 25 years. There's a crack in the garage door. There's water damage in the basement. Some siding is missing. A raccoon has made its home in the attic. There's thorn bushes making their way through the yard. When it rains, the water runs towards the house instead of away from it. One of the lights in the bathrooms is out. The windows are drafty and they don't like the color of your mailbox. First problem, what are you doing inviting that person to your house? But the bigger thing is, well, now you're aware of all of these problems. And what are you going to do about it? It's this list that goes on and on and on. And with much knowledge comes much vexation, much problems. You can't solve all the problems, but now you're aware of them. They're on your mind and it's bugging you, and it's overrun with problems, 1,000 problems over and over. And so with them not only comes the understanding of these problems, but also the understanding that you can't fix them all. That there's nothing you can do about them. They're going to be there. Some of them, sure. You can paint the mailbox and you can do this, but as you do that, the list just gets bigger and bigger, and it's more and more problems. And so his problem is not answered of what is the purpose of life. In fact, if anything, it's gotten worse because he's now aware of more problems. And so it's not answered. And we learn that with knowledge, it's not the answer. You can spend all your time in the library or in the lab or studying various topics, and you can grow in knowledge to an extreme amount that at the end of the day, what will that have accomplished? What will that have accomplished? And to emphasize the point the preacher made previously about time, time will erase all of those accomplishments. Your knowledge will end with you. You might write it down, but in time, that book itself will also fade away and never be remembered. You might even grow in knowledge to solving some grand problem like cancer, that now that's gone. Another disease will rise up. Another problem will rise up. He'll cure Bill's cancer, and then he'll get hit by a bus. Or eventually, once again, we're looking at this naturalist point of view, that giant ball of fire in the sky is going to implode and wipe out everything that we know. And so, what is the point of any of it? Under the sun, everything is vanity, meaningless. And so then he moves on. Maybe the answer is not to be found in knowledge, but rather to be found in pleasure. It seems that many people look to pleasure to find purpose, to find fulfillment, as if that is where he will find it. And it's an idea that's quite present in the past and a quite idea that is present in the world today. To expand this idea as well, understand that pleasure is a very broad category. Food, romance, material gain, doing that kitchen reno, buying a new car, sexual experiences, fame, status, riches, all of these things and more we could fit into the category of pleasure. Pleasure takes on many forms, and many people chase it for the sense of happiness that it does give them. Let's see what the preacher has to say about it. In chapter 2, verses 1 to 11, we have his ideas here. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on to folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of the growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had slaves who were born in my house. I had great possessions of herds and flocks, and more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I had also gathered for myself silver and gold for the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil that I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity, and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. And so the preacher has looked for pleasure. He has looked at it from many different angles. He fills himself with wine. He acts foolishly. He builds homes and orchards and lakes and forests. He takes on property and riches and wealth and concubines, sleeping with them as much as he desires. He has taken in slaves and had slaves born into his home. His wealth has surpassed all of those in history. And at the end of the day, his answer was, This is meaningless. Striving after the wind. This is vanity. He comes to that same conclusion. And notice the self-centeredness of this, right? You read through that section of text and it's, I did this for myself, and I had this, and I did that. I surpassed everyone. Like a toddler who's focusing on me, 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 me. But he has the resources. And so he's able to, like, some of us, we have this idea of, well, if I can just get to a certain level of wealth, if I can just acquire enough toys, if I can just get that new car, if I can just get something. And we think that there's a line that as soon as we cross that in the area of pleasure, in the area of material things, and level of travel and experience and all these things, then that will, finally I will feel good and I'll have fulfillment and life will be well and the joy will last. And his response is no. No, it will not. Meaningless. Vanity. And this is echoed in our world. We look at those who do have great wealth, fame, and the latest toys and the biggest houses, and they often echo the same thing as the preacher. I feel empty. I feel as if this is pointless. I thought this would bring me fulfillment, and it has not. And yet often the thought is, well, if I can make another million, if I can just get another car, if I can just build another home, oh, I haven't had a beach house, I'll build one of those. Oh, I need a resort up in the mountains. And on, we just build this materialistic view of the spark of happiness, because you get that new car and it's like, this is awesome. And then some time goes on and it's less awesome. And then you find yourself looking at the next car. Some other things, you buy a phone and by the time you get home, the thing's obsolete. Like it's so quickly replacing what was new is now old. And we get this spark of joy and it's gone, it's fleeting, it's not lasting, it's not true joy. Under the sun, everything is vanity. Everything is meaningless. Next, he considers wisdom, and while making the clear statement that it's better to be wise than to be a fool, he falls short in explaining why. Instead, he points out that both die, both the wise and the fool, they both will die and they both will be forgotten in time. Verses 15 to 16, or rather to 17, he says, Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this is also a vanity. For of the wise, as of the fools, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that the days to come will all have been long forgotten, how the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for vanity and a striving after the wind. He's really entering into a state of despair here. I've looked at so much. I've looked at all the things that I've done, and I can say that it's good for me to be wise. But I can't put my finger on why, because the fool dies just like I will. And 1,000 years from now, no one's going to remember him, and no one's going to remember me. You can hear the despair in his words. In the reflection of his life, he says, I hated my life. But maybe he'll find purpose in the next category. He's looked at wisdom and knowledge. He's looked at his lifestyle of wisdom. He's looked at the pursuit of pleasure. And next he looks to work. Now many people have poured themselves into their work, becoming workaholics, or maybe not even to that degree, but they have their identity wrapped up in their work. Or simply they have a sense that I have done something, I have contributed something. Many people who, say, are in the trades, for example, right? They drive past a project that they have worked on in the past, and their family has to hear them over and over. Oh, I laid that foundation. I built that. I inspected that. I built that sidewalk, or helped design this sewer system. And over time, every time they pass it, they bring it up over and over. There's this sense of fulfillment in that. But once again, the pursuit of time, or not the pursuit of time, but the nature of time. A generation comes and a generation goes. That house or that sidewalk or that skyscraper or that park, whatever it was that someone poured their work into and takes pride in, and I built that. Time will tear that thing apart. There will be a day where it no longer is. Let's see what the preacher's assessment. Verses 18 to 23. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is a vanity. So once again, the preacher comes to the same problem. This is not answered here. I don't find fulfillment in the work. It's like someone who buys a house and they fix it up. They redo everything and it's beautiful. And then time goes on. They have to eventually leave it to someone. They're not going to be there forever. Whether they move to a new home or they die and someone comes in and purchases the home. And then what? Maybe they improve it. Maybe they cherish it. Maybe they tear the place down and they turn it into a parking lot. And so what's the point? What's the point of me storing this all up if it's going to go to nothing? And people can say, oh, well, I'm building a great fortune for my family's generations to come. The average family fortune lasts for 3 generations and then it's gone. And so he comes to this same conclusion. Under the sun, all is vanity. And if you haven't caught it yet, that is the key. That phrase right there that you have heard nowhere else in the Bible, but is said 28 or 29, but I think 28 times in this book. Under the sun, 29 times. In the book of Ecclesiastes. And in fact, in the 2 chapters we just read, it's mentioned 8 times. Under the sun. If you miss this point, then this book becomes dreary and hopeless and confusing. Despair will set in. But the pursuit of purpose and fulfillment, he has restricted it to this view only in consideration of under the sun. But the joyful thing, the hopeful thing, is there is life above the sun. There's a hope above the sun. And there is more than just this. And with that in mind, we can look at our work, pleasures, and knowledge and say, there's a purpose to this. With my eyes set on eternity, with my focus being on life above the sun, life below the sun can have reason. And I can enjoy it. Not that it is the life here that brings fulfillment, but the life there that I look forward to. See, what the preacher has done is he has given you a naturalistic view of the world. A naturalistic view as if that when you look around and you see nature and you see the physical world, that is all that there is. There is no soul, there is no spirit, and there is no God. Now, that's not true. I'm not saying that. But he's presenting that view. And he's doing that so that he can bring about this point that under the sun, that is looking at life without God in the picture, everything is utterly meaningless, pointless. There is vanity. There's nothing to it. And it leaves you wanting more. in verse 24 to 26, we get the key. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is a vanity and a striving after the wind. The things that you have, the work that you do, the wisdom in your head is a gift from God. Enjoy it. Use the resources you have. Use them with wisdom. Use them for the glory of God. Enjoy this life with your eyes set on the life to come. There is a hint here at simplistic living. And really simplicity is a Christian quality that is often forgotten and overlooked. But it's something that the Bible has called us to over and over. This idea of living simply, of being content with what we have been given by God and trying not to keep up with the Joneses, but just being happy with what we have, enjoying it, but not seeking fulfillment in it. And that's the thing. It's fine to say, I like my car. We recently, we had our third child, and so we got out of the SUV that we had, and we got a bigger one, and I'll say a better one. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the car quite a bit. But I do not find my fulfillment in it. I don't find my happiness or my joy in it. I find that from God and God alone. And it's by looking to God for fulfillment and purpose that then I can actually enjoy the things that He has given to me. If rather I look to the things that He has given to me, the things that I've gathered in this natural world, if I look to those for my purpose and fulfillment, then I will fall short every day of the week, and I will be left in despair, and I'll have little moments of what seems like happiness, but it's fleeting. It doesn't last. Verse 25 poses the question, right? For apart from Him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? That is, those who are apart from God, right? Without looking to God, without knowing God, who can actually enjoy this life? The answer is none. It's only by looking above the sun that we can enjoy the things that are under it. Those who are opposed to God, the work that they do hoping to find purpose and fulfillment in it. But it will not give them that. They are searching in all the wrong places. It is only in God that one finds the true purpose and true fulfillment. Furthermore, the preacher tells us that the work that they do for these worldly things they build up will be given to the one who pleases God. And that person will use that for God. And so to remind yourself of that your purpose is to glorify God. Or sorry, I skipped ahead there. The first problem, right? And as I said, as we look through Ecclesiastes, we'll see a number of problems. And he has this philosophical way of looking and saying, here's an answer that falls short. Here's an answer that falls short. Here's an answer that falls short. But here's the actual answer. The problem was, or the question was, what is the purpose of life? And what we looked at is, well, here's an option under the sun. Here's an option under the sun. Here's an option under the sun. They all fall short. Here's an answer from above the sun. That God is the one whom we find purpose in life in. And that's the one that answers it. So remind yourself of that. Your purpose is to glorify God. Your fulfillment can only be found in knowing Him. In the past, I have used these expressions of our intended nature, our cursed nature, our redeemed nature, and then our glorified nature. The history of mankind as we come into Christ, we're now redeemed, and we look forward to the day where we will be, glorified in these glorified bodies. And and it's in that we can see that our purpose was to know God and to bring glory to God and to serve Him and to be pleasing in His sight. And so it's only in that we will actually have fulfillment and purpose. All of these other pursuits, they may give a spark of joy, but it's not true, and it doesn't last. It is Habel. It is vanity. a vapor. You can try and grasp it, but your hand will be empty, leaving you wanting more. It is only in God that we may grasp and find what we have been looking for, what the heart longs for. C.S. Lewis had a quote that went with this idea wonderfully. It was this idea of, I have this desire and it's matched with something here. I have this desire and it's matched with something here. I have a desire that cannot be matched. It's as if I was made to find that somewhere else. I'm butchering the quote, but it was this idea that I have this desire of fulfillment. I have this desire of a grand purpose in life, but I can't find the answer under the sun. It's only by looking to God that we find the answer for that. In Jesus' teaching, one of the things he said is that he came to bring life and life to the fullest. It is only in him that one can find life to the fullest. People will look in many, many different places. And you yourself might catch yourself realizing, you know what? I thought my emptiness that I felt could be answered by a material thing, or an experience, or a relationship, or some level of status, or wisdom, or in my work. It can't. It can only be found in God, in relationship with him. And what wonderful news that this really is. As the preacher explores these other areas of hope, and he's left with this statement of vanity of vanities. This is meaningless. There's no purpose here. This is hopeless. And he's left with this conclusion, which is simply despair and depression in this strong sense. It's like overwhelming despair that he expresses as he looks through the natural world. The Christian, the redeemed, should match that in opposite. To the level of despair and hopelessness he has, we have extreme hope and extreme joy. What a wonderful thing. We have fulfillment in Christ. We have found the thing that everyone is looking for. We have found purpose. We have found fulfillment. And we know that it's not in these other things, but we have found God. And through that, we are living how we were meant to be. We have life and life to the fullest. And so what is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to know and to glorify God. That's it, simply put. And when we do that, we can then enjoy the life here with our eyes fixed on the life to come. That is our first look into the book of Ecclesiastes. And I truly do hope that you are not putting weight, you are not depending on these worldly things to give you joy, to give you fulfillment, to give you purpose. And if you find that you are, this is one of those times where I say, take inventory of your life, look at your life, and ask that question humbly. Am I looking for purpose in these other things? I have in the past. And what I remind myself of is, this is not going to bring me joy. This is not going to give me fulfillment. It is God alone. And I will understand that, and I will live for him and glorify him and seek him. And through him, I will have life and life to the fullest. And I hope you do too. Lord, be with us as we go through this week. May we enjoy what you have given to us, but may we look to you for our purpose and for our value and for fulfillment of this life. We love you, Lord. You are so wonderful. Be with us. Amen. I hope you have a great week, and I truly do hope you honor God in all that you do.